Hey pilots, 𝓒𝓞𝓝𝓣𝓡𝓡 here. If you watched the PvP podcast, you might have noticed that I made a remark wishing I had the time to release a 3.7 Hornet compilation, because in that patch, with the way everything was tuned, the Hornet was very nicely balanced with the Gladius. Luckily, digging through my hard drive, I was able to find some footage from when I was working on the 3.7 Hornet compilation, and I decided to make this video because I want you guys to see what a small change in the game's mechanics can translate into in terms of combat balance. The major change between 3.7 and 3.8, where the Hornet was excellent versus when it was terrible, was the auto gimbal ring in 3.7 was a little smaller, small enough that you could pay attention to the periphery of the ring and time your shots for when you had gimbal lock, and the tracking speed was a little faster. So even though the Hornet has rather poor attitude control, doesn't turn particularly quickly, and it tends to have poor rotational jerk and acceleration ramp up, especially when pitching up, you would tend to need to wait a little while till it reached maximum pitch up speed, and then wait a little while before it stopped pitching up. But even with this strange attitude control mechanism, because you can make pass-through shots due to the rapid lock-on time of the auto gimbals, you could really make this thing work if you were able to time your shots and slide the reticle over the pip at the right time and fire at the right time. So it was actually easier to aim with the smaller auto gimbal ring than it was with the larger one, because not only could you see with your peripheral vision when the auto gimbals would lock on and time your shots accordingly, the gimbals would never turn too far away from center. So when you did manage to get your reticle over the pip, chances are you would be locked on and you would be able to make a shot, and you could time your firing to when that happened. When the gimbal ring is larger, it's possible for the gimbals to be turned far away from center, so even if you managed to perfectly aim at the pip in a pass-through shot, there was a chance you would miss and you wouldn't achieve gimbal lock because they would be aiming somewhere far away from center, which I don't like. I think if you manage to aim perfectly at the reticle, the gimbal lock should be instant. But enough about that. Let's get into the combat. Now, in terms of combat tactics, Gladius versus Hornet fights were very interesting. Obviously, the Gladius is much more maneuverable, more resistant to overheating, and the Hornet is a little more tanky, but has far more powerful weapons. It was able to sport 5 sledge mass drivers as opposed to the Gladius's 3. This meant that the Gladius had to survive by avoiding fire, whereas the Hornet was more about tanking it. And obviously this is easier said than done. You still had to dodge shots as much as you could in the Hornet, and if you let the Gladius get very close and you stayed relatively stationary, the Gladius could take advantage of its far greater maneuverability and turning rate to be able to get in a position where it could land unopposed fire on you, and you just wouldn't be able to turn fast enough to get it. Now, at the same time, the Gladius could get out to range, get out to medium range, maybe 600 meters away or so, and because it had faster strafe accelerations, it would be able to dodge all your shots at that range, fire shots at you, and because you'd be less maneuverable, you wouldn't be able to dodge those shots. So your job as the Hornet pilot was to pay very close attention to your range and ensure that the Gladius didn't get into a nice close position or get too far away. So it was a very interesting example of the different combat styles that a light fighter and medium fighter pilot have to take.
Not effective.
So this here is why you should avoid just doing a straight decoupled reverse strafe. A pilot in a fairly maneuverable ship can just fly right alongside you, perpendicular to you, and land a lot of hits. So definitely something to avoid if you're, at the very least, facing multiple opponents. Now here's a very interesting battle. The Hornet versus the Saber, two medium fighters duking it out. The Hornet's got one extra gun, the Saber's got one extra shield. The Hornet strafes a little faster, but the Saber turns a little smoother. The way I would approach fighting another medium fighter would be either going into close range, and in 3.7 the desync wasn't so bad, and you actually could get in close, knowing the auto gimbal cone was fairly small, be able to look at the target's nose, and try and move out of their firing arcs based on where their nose is pointing. Alternatively, you would stick at medium range and try to land more shots with superior accuracy while heavily strafing and maneuvering to avoid incoming fire. Unfortunately, at that point in time, the Saber still had a shield hole. It would have been very interesting to see that fixed and see if all three of these fighters would be balanced. You see this fight start out at medium range. An attempt to close was made, but it resulted in overshoot due to more of a blow-through commitment on his part. Now I'm in sort of a pursuit pattern, and I get close enough to land some final blows. And finally we have the ultimate test. Hornet versus Hornet, and Jolly's a fantastic pilot. We overshoot each other, but now move into close. We get into that medium strafing range, where we're both landing hits. We manage to get closer. I'm committing to kind of keeping him at medium range at this point, because I know he's very accurate. He's going to land a ton of hits at close range. He manages to push me, but I'm able to counter it. And as you can see, 5 mass drivers versus 5 mass drivers results in a rapid conclusion. And this is what happens when you spend a little bit too much time in the G-Lock bar before hopping into the cockpit. Thank you so much for watching. If you're looking for a friendly PvP community where skilled pilots offer training opportunities, join the 𝓒𝓞𝓝 PvP Academy Discord link below. If you're interested in the controllers I use and what my curve settings are, please check the description. See you in the next one, pilots. 𝓒𝓞𝓝 out.